Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Series 4 of the Climate Pioneers Show. This is a show where we're speaking to the innovators, the changemakers, and the enablers that are driving forward the climate industry. Each of our series of this show so far have had a different focus. In previous series, we featured the stories of early stage startup founders in the UK. We've looked at the insights and heard the advice of climate tech investors. And we've heard the stories and the struggles of female climate tech founders and their thoughts on the gender funding gap. But now we're back and almost halfway through Series 4, our first US-focused series, where we're featuring the stories of climate tech innovators on the East Coast of the US. We're learning about the important work that they're doing to combat the climate crisis, and we're digging into what inspired them to take action in the first place. But most importantly, we are going to be getting their tips. We're going to be finding out about the communities and the organizations that have helped them along the way, the books and the podcasts that they recommend, and the productivity hacks that they use to manage their workload. And today I am delighted to be joined by Josef Bromovsky, the CEO of Algoma. Partnering with real estate developers, they're working towards automated repeat delivery of zero carbon buildings. And in a world where we need to keep building, we need to make sure we're doing it in the least carbon intensive way. And Algoma have that solution. Josef and his co-founders launched the business in May 2023. And with his background in civil engineering and time spent working both for a major contractor and a major engineering consultancy, he's had insight into both sides of the construction sector. And that, combined with his MBA, have set him in very good stead for launching a business addressing this problem. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about the journey and learning about what Josef and the team are planning for 2024. So Josef, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Very happy to be here.
My pleasure. So are you able to, first of all, share with us a little bit more about Algoma? What's the problem space that you're in, and exactly how is the solution that you've come up with addressing that, and how is it unique in the space?
Yeah, so I mean, the problem that we set out to address are kind of three major problems that I think everyone's pretty aware of in the construction and engineering industry. The first is, particularly in the US, we need 6 million new homes to meet current demand. It remains a very unsustainable and climate intensive industry. Buildings as an asset class contribute 40% of global greenhouse gases. A significant portion of these are from the building materials we use. If concrete were a country, it would be the third highest emitter behind the US and China, which is a stat I always find sort of staggering. And it's still an industry that has yet to be truly disrupted by technology. It hasn't seen the productivity improvements that something like manufacturing has, and there's still a huge amount of opportunity for technology to improve how we deliver homes and buildings in general. So we're setting out to try and solve some of these problems, to try and automate some of the architecture and engineering that goes into creating net zero buildings. So we can speed up the delivery of homes, we can make it cheaper and faster, and most importantly, perhaps make it sustainable, so that we're using building materials that are much more climate friendly than the ones that are currently in use.
Amazing. And how does that come in from a cost parity perspective? Because often one of the challenges and one of the things that holds developers back from using more, I suppose, less carbon intensive materials is getting to that cost parity, but it's cheaper to do it the way we've always done it, right? So yeah, talk me through how you make it viable, I suppose, for them in that sense.
Yeah, well, I think speed is the key to making these things economically viable. On any construction project, about 50% of the cost is labor. So if you can find ways to significantly shorten the overall construction program, then you're going to be able to find significant cost savings ultimately for the real estate developer or the home builder. And I think that is the key to making these projects economically viable before you get cost parity, because the key on the material side to get it down to as cheap as building materials that have been in use for 50 years is scale. Like, you have to be building at a huge scale all across the country, and until that happens, the key and we've seen eco-friendly building materials increased pretty significantly over the past few years. We use, in particular, mass timber, which is this form of engineered wood that's super strong and fire resistant. And it's essentially a replacement for concrete and steel. Um,
Okay.
and it's coming down to cost parity between concrete and steel. But the key to making the overall project cheaper than the traditional approach is through the speed of delivery.
Amazing. I love that. Okay, cool. And where did this kind of passion and interest in climate and sustainability specifically come from? Is that something that you were interested in right through sort of from your civil engineering and early construction days, or even before that? Where did it come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been interested in climate issues.
Mm,
But probably I think that the turning point was the realization that the industry I was working in, construction and engineering, has such a huge impact on overall carbon emissions. That was something that I just did not know. Probably for the first, 5, 6 years of my career, I had no idea of the stats. It's, everyone I think thinks of transport. It's a
hmm
kind of easy connection to make with the overall carbon emissions. And just hadn't connected building materials with those kind of stats. And I think it was when I started, looking more into that and realizing that the impact it has, that it's such a huge proportion of the overall emissions. And really the only way we're going to get to our overall climate goals is if we address construction engineering. And so I think once I'd realized that, then it became clear that I wanted to do something entrepreneurial, but in the construction and engineering space.
Amazing. And yeah, you're right. I think it's one of those stats that most people don't know, right?
Right.
And probably a lot of people in the construction sector don't know. But I think the impact of cement is double that of aviation, right? But aviation
Right.
is the one that you hear more about.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you always known? I mean, you said once you realized that and once the penny dropped, that was when you kind of thought, right, I want to do something about that. Was that when the entrepreneurial spark came in, or has that kind of always been there as well?
I think it's always been there, but I think it took a long time for me to get the sort of courage to really pursue it. I think it's a big
Mm,
jump going from the safety of working in a sort of large corporation to doing something entrepreneurial. Ultimately, I think entrepreneurship is the best route to making an impact. So I think if there's something that you want to make an impact on, or some kind of issue that you're incredibly passionate about, I think entrepreneurship is the route to making that impact and through that. But, it took me, I don't think it necessarily takes everyone, but it took me, a while to get up the courage and feel comfortable enough to actually pursue it and actually undertake something entrepreneurial.
yeah. Oh, understandable. It's a huge, and like you said, having come from such large organisations that you've been in, Balfour Beatty, ACOM, to go from that to on your own is a huge. It's night and day, isn't it? And where did you meet your co-founders, and where did that moment come when you did get that confidence and you did think, right, we're going to do this?
Yeah. So I don't think there's ever, I think one of the realizations was, there's never a moment where you're like, oh, now I feel comfortable enough, or now I think I know enough to do it. But
Yeah.
I think the realization was that moment never comes, and you've just got to take that leap. At some point, I took the route which was to go and study an MBA, actually in the US. So I was working in London before that, came to the US to study MBA. And that allowed me a number of things. First, it sort of gave me the space to really plan out, how the business model, plan out how we're going to approach it. Basically give you a period of time where you can really plan out how the business is going to work. And I'd come from an engineering background, so it also provided some kind of necessary business skills
Mm.
in kind of setting up and starting that business. And it allowed me to meet my two other co-founders, which were incredibly important for the overall business. So my route was to go and sort of take this study, do an MBA, and that allowed me to, put all the pieces together. It also allowed me to start the sort of fundraising journey while in the safety net of still doing this MBA, which allows you a bit more flexibility and a bit more confidence to sort of go out and do that, knowing that you're still part of this kind of overall MBA program.
And did you have the idea for Algoma prior to undertaking the MBA? And was the MBA almost to give you the knowledge and the confidence you needed to act upon the idea you'd had? Or did the idea kind of come to you as you were doing the MBA?
Yeah, the idea was definitely sort of formed during the MBA. I think there
Mm,
was a big regulation change that happened in the US in 2021,
right.
which was this material mass timber, this form of engineered wood. Basically, the International Building Code got updated to allow construction up to 18 stories using this material. This eco-friendly material, whereas previously it was around sort of 6 stories. So that
Mhm.
was like a massive regulation change that happened in 2021. And that was kind of the catalyst to start thinking about, how could we build a business around kind of net zero construction using this material now that the regulatory environment is much more friendly, particularly in the US.
Amazing. And that's great timing, right? Because I genuinely feel like the most successful climate startups are the ones that are at that nexus of regulatory change or regulatory pressure, either either carrot or stick on the regulatory side, making it timely, whilst at the same time you're saving your clients and customers money and there's a climate benefit. If you can get all those three
Right.
things together, then yeah,
Yeah.
that's perfect.
I,
Great.
I
Okay.
I think it's so important for climate solutions in general
Mm,
to just be a really good product almost without the sustainability benefits. Like, if you look at Tesla's website, all of yeah, sustainability is not mentioned anywhere on their website. They don't really talk about their eco credentials. Everyone knows about it, of course, but they
mm,
set out to build the best car and to compete as the best car. And then the sustainability is, an amazing benefit on top of that, but they're sort of competing at the car level. And I think that is, a useful approach for any climate tech founder to really, not rely purely on the sustainability aspects, because it can be a difficult fight.
absolutely agree. And so from Algoma's perspective, for you, it's the efficiency, the speed of
Yeah,
build, as well. And how do they compare in terms of quality and
yeah,
sort of durability and things like sort of in storm zones, like hurricane zones and earthquake areas and things? And how do they work there?
yeah. Well, I think one of their to answer the first part of that question first,
Hmm.
one of their key selling points is you can create these amazing aesthetics on the inside. So because you're leaving this mass timber exposed, it creates these incredible, like, warm, natural interiors. And now there's quite a few mass timber buildings appearing in the US. I would advise any listener to sort of go and stand in one, because they have an amazing natural feel inside. And I think humans have kind of a natural connection being in these buildings, and you immediately feel the difference to like a concrete or steel structure.
Mhm.
And I think that is key to the overall product being like an end product for people to live in.
Yeah.
And then on the question on the kind of like earthquake storms, these buildings have been put up in earthquake zones, in high wind tornado areas. You can create structures that are just as strong as any other type of building, and that are safe to build in any of these areas. All these buildings have hybrid components. You're still using concrete foundations. You can still create like a core to stabilize some of the horizontal forces. So it's all about how the buildings are created, but these materials are safe to build, anywhere across the US and the world.
Okay, fantastic. And how do they work around kind of local planning acts and specific requirements in particular areas? I'm thinking, here in the UK, we have lots of conservation areas and really stringent planning rules about particular building materials.
Right.
How do they fit with that?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, in the US, there was this change, right, which was
Mm,
the International Building Code allowed up to 18 stories, and then states have been adopting this regulation change at different rates. So, I think we're now at about 55 to 60% of the US states have adopted these kind of 18 stories mass timber provisions, and the rest have kind of timetables of when they're being adopted at different rates.
right.
The UK is actually, strangely, a market. Although I'm from the UK, I know less about on the mass timber elements.
Mhm.
Mass timber construction has been more difficult in the UK because after the Grenfell Tower tragedy, a lot of the building code restrictions were made kind of tighter. Obviously, mass timber didn't play a part in that tragedy, but it was kind of a casualty of those overall regulation change. But
Yeah.
I think the UK has just released a timber in construction roadmap,
Okay.
and I think that was released this week or last week, and that is starting to look at how can we use timber more in the construction industry in the UK, because everyone's starting to realize like it is basically the only material that is going to allow construction to truly have a sustainable future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And so you're about 9 months in now, is that right, to this journey
Exactly.
officially?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
we sort of launched officially in May. Once I graduated from the MBA, we'd been working on it before that for a number of months, but that was our sort of official launch time, and have
Mhm.
been working on it full time since then. Sort of 9 months, I guess,
And what
six
do
to
those
nine
first
months.
9 months look like? Talk me through what have been the highs and the proud moments and the achievements, and what are some of the challenges and struggles been in that time as well?
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a roller coaster, as I think all entrepreneurial journeys are. And, it's been a pretty tumultuous macroeconomic environment as well.
Mhm.
But we definitely, the highlights are we raised a sort of pre-seed round, sort of right at the beginning of that period as we're graduating, which has given us the kind of funds for about 18 months.
Amazing.
We started working on our first mass timber project, which is going to be here in the US, which has been very exciting. But it's a difficult period,
Mhm.
especially for VC investment. It's a difficult period this year, and for real estate development, it's a difficult period. Interest rates going up the way they have in the US has put a lot of development on hold. Um, and the kind of overall environment has been challenging. But I think that is it just makes you have to be really focused, and really sure that your solution ultimately is a better solution, because you're not getting anything for free in the current environment.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think to have raised a pre-seed at such an early stage in the business's inception is incredible. To have done so in this economic environment is doubly incredible. So congratulations on that. Um, but yeah, you're right. It's been challenging on both those sides of the fence, right? On that VC side and on the development side. And are you focused predominantly on domestic builds and housing, or is it more commercial, or are you looking at both sides?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we would look to both sides. I think right
Yeah.
now for these first few test projects, to show our approach and show the speed of delivery and show the end product that we're trying to create, we're focusing on multifamily.
Mhm.
Like the US needs a lot of new homes, so that fundamental like macro demand factor I think is positive, and it's why we're focused on it right now. Office, commercial, every major company is trying to wrangle with the fact, are their employees coming in, are they doing a hybrid, what should they do with their office space? um, Couple that with interest rates going up, that's a tougher sector I think to be in right now. So right now for these test projects, we're focusing on the multifamily, and particularly uh, buildings that are between sort of 4 and 12 stories, because that's where we can get the most efficiency, and I think that's
Okay.
where we can create the most value for real estate developers.
Amazing. So that kind of mid-rise domestic. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. And regulatory wise, I know we touched on this slightly already, because
Yeah.
state by state, these building codes are getting rolled out. But how are you feeling about how the regulatory market and policies and attitudes in general are
Yeah.
going to work in or against your favour next year, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of positive things happening on the regulatory environment. For
Mm.
example, both New York and Atlanta recently ran mass timber accelerators, as they called them, which were giving grants to projects to consider the use of mass timber, to consider the use of using this material in their development project that they're working on, and they were awarding it to different projects. And I think that demonstrates that these were obviously set up by cities to encourage this type of construction. And I think that speaks to the how the overall regulatory environment is changing.
Mm.
That governments, and cities are trying to encourage this type of construction. They're understanding the benefits of it, the sustainability, the speed, the aesthetics, and they're really starting to support it through these grants. And I hope that we will see more of that continue in 2024. We'll see more cities starting programs like these, and maybe even support at the federal level as well.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And what is the embodied carbon difference between a mass timber building versus a concrete building, for example?
Yeah, so for a 10-story building, if you create a mass timber building as opposed to concrete and steel, you save about 4,000 metric tons of carbon. So that's the same as taking about 900 cars off the road.
Wow. And
So
that's for
that's
one
just
10-story
one
building.
building. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a huge benefit to using mass timber from a carbon standpoint, and you're obviously using wood that has trapped carbon in itself over its life as a tree, and you're locking that carbon away for the duration of that building. And even when that building gets demolished, you can reuse that mass timber, you can disassemble and reuse it. So there's a huge climate benefit. You obviously have to source from well managed forestry, that you're not depleting the overall forest stock. But if you look in the US, overall forest has actually increased over the last 50 years quite significantly. In the southeast, it's grown by about 30% extra forest in the last 50 years, which is always at least it was a surprising statistic for me.
Yeah.
So there is a significant amount of wood that is being grown in the US, and it can be managed sustainably. So you're not contributing to any deforestation, and you're locking carbon away in these buildings while avoiding using very carbon intensive materials like concrete, like steel.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. And talk me through the highlights. You mentioned the pre-seed round
Yeah.
being one of them. What else are you particularly proud of, and what have you got coming up that you're excited about on the same vein?
Yeah, well, we've been part of a number of accelerators here in New York City. We were part of UrbanX accelerator that supports kind of climate tech and urban tech startups, that's run by Mini, as well as being part of Hacks, which is part of SOSV, which is an investment fund. They also had an accelerator program. So that's been amazing experience and super helpful when you're an early stage startup and trying to sort out so many different things. But ultimately, we want to be able to demonstrate our product, demonstrate the benefits it can bring. So working on this initial project is super exciting. We are hiring as well, which is exciting. We're looking for a head of structural engineering. So if there is anyone out there listening who knows a candidate who could be suitable, there's a job posting on our LinkedIn, and yeah, would love to receive applications for that as well.
Excellent. Well, fingers crossed the perfect person will be listening and will come to you through this. I very much hope so. And from an accelerator perspective, you said you've been a member of a couple of them now.
Yeah.
As a fledgling business, what are the key benefits you think you get from going through those accelerators? And in your experience, what have been the most valuable takeaways that you've had from those?
Yeah, I think, there are lots of accelerators out there, and they all offer sort of a slightly different set of um, criteria. But I think, you can't, and you can't rely on them to be like, they're going to make your business work, but they are an amazing kind of support function. Often they have, great brands. So if you're looking for people to hire or connections into people, you can leverage their brand to meet people, to talk to them. They're just great kind of centers of a network. They've got previous companies that have gone through them. They have experts that work with them. They have investors that know them. So I think it's always like a lot of these things is the ability to just talk to more people. I think entrepreneurship in general, a lot of it is just like creating as many potential opportunities for random good things to happen. And
Yeah.
that's just by talking to so many people, meeting as many people you can, talking to other companies, and then you just never know what's going to happen. And accelerators, I think, are a way of maximizing that opportunity for something random and good to happen.
Super. Yeah, I could not agree with that more. I absolutely think there's no such thing as a wasted conversation, is there, in those early days? Because you never know what you'll learn, who that person knows, who they can put you in touch with. And the more you put out into the world,
Yeah.
it'll come back at some point. So yeah, great advice.
And
Perfect.
I think, I think people want to support you in general. Like
Yeah.
if they see you're an early stage startup and you're fully committed to what you're doing, you're the one taking the risk and you demonstrate that you're like fully committed to this idea, people will help you. Once they see that kind of commitment, and I think that would be my advice for people who are thinking about doing a startup or taking that jump is once you commit and people see that, random good stuff tends to happen.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there already about hiring for a structural engineer. So already put the shout out
Yeah.
there, anyone that knows somebody or is somebody that could be good at that job, to check it out. Are there any other asks that you would have? What, anything else that would really help you next year? Any connections, any intros, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking to meet and talk to real estate developers. Ultimately, they're our customer. They're the person we do projects for. And so, we love talking to real estate developers, demonstrating, our software, how it works, how we do the design and engineering process. So the opportunity to speak to any real estate developers who might be interested in our approach is always valuable to us.
Superb. Excellent. And we always round out these episodes with some quick fire recommendations if you're ready and
Okay.
if you're up for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the first one being a community or organization, sort of people-based resource. What
Right.
communities do you feel have most supported you on your journey so far?
Yeah. Well, I think probably my best answer is if there's anyone interested in learning more about mass timber specifically, the online free community and resource of Woodworks, you can
Okay.
find them on their site. It has an amazing amount of free information and people to talk to about using mass timber. So I would say anyone who's hearing about mass timber first time, I think that's a great one to check out.
Superb. And what about a media-based resource? So a book, a podcast, a TED Talk, a film, documentary that has been valuable, informative, inspiring to you along the way.
Yeah, I probably think to learn about, I'm obviously based in the US, learn about startups in the US,
Mm,
how venture capitalists think, how to like create a business that they're interested in. I think Zero to One by Peter Thiel is a pretty short, concise, but amazingly helpful insight into that whole world.
okay. So how to build something that will be attractive as an investment vehicle, essentially.
Yeah, well, I guess it's how to build a business,
Mm,
and it's how to make your startup successful, but it's
yeah,
also about how to, I guess, demonstrate that to potential investors.
right. I see. Fabulous. And what about a productivity tip? And that could be anything, like a tool, a methodology, anything that helps you to manage the craziness of the founder work-life balance.
Yeah, I mean, mine, I guess, is probably not that exciting and maybe personal, but it's always I always just have to keep doing some form of exercise, otherwise, to keep my mind clear. Otherwise, everything gets on top of me and things start falling apart. So trying to do just 30 minutes of whatever it is a day, I think
Mhm.
for me is life changing.
And what's your exercise of choice?
Running, very very boring, but I find kind of meditative.
But brilliant, because
Yeah,
meditative, free, you can do it anywhere. I wish I loved
exactly.
running. I've never got
Yeah.
the bug.
Yeah.
Every now and
No.
again, I force myself to go for a run, and I think maybe this will be the one. Maybe this will be the run where I get the
Yeah.
bug, and I no, it's 37. It hasn't happened yet.
It'll happen. It'll happen.
Well, didn't Paula Radcliffe discover running quite late on? So there's still hope.
Yeah,
But
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. There's still
absolutely.
hope.
Well, Joseph, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time. Do share that journey, share those experiences, and share what you're working on. And thank you to everybody that's listening, whether you're listening to us live or whether you're listening to us on catch up. I really appreciate you taking the time and spending it with us. And if they have missed any of the episodes in this series so far, you can go and catch them either on my LinkedIn page, you can watch them on YouTube in video format, or if you want to listen to them on the go, you can catch them all on Spotify, Acast, and Apple Podcasts. But for now, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.